Good afternoon. Today's Q&A is number 40, and it comes to you from a very jet-lagged me, so therefore this might be a little bit slower, but I will do my best to keep it going. And the title of today's Q&A is Personas and Kink Identities. Now, what do I mean when I say this? When I say this, I mean the roles that we choose to identify with when we're playing in the world of kink. This could be as a dominant, this could be as a submissive, this could be as a pet, this could be as so many different options. And you might already be familiar with what those might be for you, or you might be interested to see what the options are. Now, they can also be something that is experienced in a scene. This could be through role play, or it could be something experienced in a lifestyle, something that is a relationship dynamic. So this is how I see personas and roles. Now, you have asked me some questions over the last 24 hours, or a little bit less, in my Q&A box. If you have any more, feel free to add them down below, and maybe we shall get into it, and I can close everything by indulging you a little bit into how I experience these things personally, if I don't get through it through your questions. So feel free to ask me some more, but we will go through what we have as well. So this was quite a sweet one. Can you discuss different archetypes of Dom personas, please? Femme fatale, mother, etc. Now, I have seen a few different courses try to identify and utilize these specific archetypes in order to help people to embody how they can express themselves as Doms. And I think that it is a very useful exercise for sure, as we can maybe just choose the ones that this person has chose. Let's say we take the role of a femme fatale and how that can be used in order to find your way of dominance. That could be the femme fatale as somebody who uses seduction in order to find their way into the minds of others and to instigate their submission. Now, it could also be, as this person asks, in the archetype of mother. It could be something where there is this nurturing aspect and almost a lulling into bringing people into a submission. So I think there's many different ways that these particular archetypes can bring out different aspects of your dominance, and they can be utilized in a combination of ways. And personally for me, I didn't have that training, and I didn't have that way of thinking in terms of there's this, there's that, there's this, let me practice what it's like to sit in this and therefore take that. It wasn't so methodical. It was more, these are aspects of me and I'm going to express them and they get this reaction and I'm going to see how I go with that. It was more instinctive more than anything else. But I think what choosing a specific persona, archetype, identity, role for a specific scene can do, it can be useful in unlocking that part of your mind and exploring that creativity in order to expand on parts of your personality that maybe you were not aware could be utilized. Now, how does that mean in the context of how I practice or what I've been doing? I would say that for me, the largest role, obviously, that has been so much of an impact on my life was choosing to step into the role of a dominatrix, to step into the role of a dom. And what happens, or what happened then, in the very first time that I bothered to step into that, was a serious sense of joy to be in a position of power. And now, over time, for that to be revalidated again and again, it has helped me to step into a space where I feel very comfortable in that power and in asking for what I want and in going for the ways into people's minds and how I would like to see them submit to my desires. So in a way, it's almost like how roleplay can become life, which I think is maybe the biggest thing that I've learned from stepping into personas and using them. And I think that this can also be said for temporary experiences. It doesn't necessarily need to be a lifestyle or a job like I have chosen. I think it can be things such as, let me choose to be a puppy for today, and let me choose to relent to my owner for that day. What aspects of being a puppy what can that bring to my life? What can that bring to even that moment, you know? Can it bring this sense of letting go? Can it bring this sense of obedience? Can it bring this sense of mischievousness that maybe I don't necessarily allow myself in my day-to-day to express so much? So I think that these things can reveal aspects of ourselves to ourselves, and we can lean into them or we can lean out of them. And how are we going to do that without the ability to step into a sense of creativity and curiosity? And I think that when it comes to personas and roles, these are probably the greatest gifts that I felt have come from them to me. So if you have any questions, please add them down into the question box below. Let's see. Now, this segues a touch. What is your favorite type of outfit for a roleplay scenario? So when it comes to my thoughts on what a persona and what a role is, to be honest, I didn't initially understand how much dress can participate in that, however naive and ignorant that might seem. And for some people, a certain leather, a certain latex, a certain puppy mask can suddenly help them switch, can suddenly help the person who is submitting to you switch. And it can be very useful as a tool. But personally, the way that I like to experience my dominance, it isn't necessarily attached to any particular material or any particular look. I would be quite happy wearing a bathrobe and feeling quite comfortable in asking for what I want from those who want to hear that. And yeah, so there are definitely certain things that can bring things up for people on either sides of an interaction. However, for me, I go through phases probably. I find a particular outfit that I love and I get a little attached to it, but I tend to move on. So that's how I experience it. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily how others do. So, a Dom's perspective on the difference between a bottom, a sub, and a slave. I think that this is going to probably differ from person to person slightly, if not greatly. But across the board, what I would be happy using as a definition would be a bottom is not necessarily somebody that plays in a submissive headspace. I think somebody who bottoms usually receives an action, and it doesn't need to have a psychological identification attached more than the receiving of the action. Whereas a submissive has more of a psychological attachment to the desire to feel this hierarchy of sorts in a relationship, in a power dynamic. And a slave, in the BDSM context, is usually utilized in the mistress or owner, master, slave dynamic, in which case maybe a lot of power can be negotiated away from the person who is playing the role of the BDSM slave or embodying that role, where there can be a lot more ownership over day-to-day actions and things that they own when it comes to that particular role. So yes, again, I know I'm speaking a bit slowly. I'm incredibly jet lagged, but it's very sweet to be able to talk about all of these things anyway. And I hope that you're all doing all right and keeping up with my very slow pace. So okay. So somebody's asking about how do we get into this. They're asking about me specifically, which I will not address because this is not the platform for that. But how do we get into trying it in general? I would say that probably increments are probably more of something that you want to go through because when not everybody's going to jump into the deep end. Because when I first started, I had not experienced kink at all. And I had just sort of heard about this role. And I went for an interview and I joined a dungeon. And yeah, well, that was 10, 11 years ago now. And that was fairly extreme, I would say. Not totally, it definitely happens to some people, but it's quite the commitment. And it brought a lot of revelations to me very hard and fast. And it brought a lot of enjoyment, but it was also very difficult. I would probably say that if you have a trusted partner, I would look up some negotiation techniques and some understanding of what you're maybe looking to experience and communicate that between each other and do it for a very defined period of time, maybe an hour. You could even do this with somebody who specializes in it. But I would say that's a good place to start. And it could not necessarily even be remember, it doesn't have to be something that has to stick with you forever. It can just be something really playful that could just be a little bit of a laugh. It doesn't have to be that serious. Because, to be honest, I believe that play has a lot to offer. And sometimes when we don't understand that it's sneaking up on us, it can have some of the greatest impact. So that would probably be a way that I would suggest letting a persona or a role start to creep into your consciousness and your understanding of what you could be or how you could interact with the world. So that would be my advice for starting to try it in general. So yes. There's some very interesting questions here, but I don't think that they're necessarily suitable for this particular chat. Things talking about limits and things talking about specific kinks, which are not suitable for here at all. But thank you so much for joining me. I think I'm going to round off this one. If you don't have any more questions specific to this topic that you want to put into the question box down below, I'm going to round it off. So how I started this was about what personas and roles mean in general and to me. And we went through a few different of your questions, but I think that I'm just going to reiterate that for me, my greatest takeaway from giving a moment to the big role that is the dominatrix in my life has taught me that people are interested in hearing my opinion and in hearing my desires, and for me to be able to redo that again and again and to revalidate it has really helped me in my day-to-day. I think that's probably been the biggest takeaway in terms of how I could apply this role play into my life and how it has benefited my life in general. And then I think that when it comes to more momentary things, I think that stepping into a role play scenario where maybe you are a nurse or maybe you are a puppy owner, or maybe you are so many other possibilities in this DS dynamic. And actually, on that side note, it doesn't even have to necessarily have anything to do with DS. You could be two puppies. Yeah, puppies are on the mind, obviously. But yeah, it can really open up a sense of freedom into being ridiculous and into allowing yourself to act a certain way, feel a certain way that maybe you're not used to indulging, and that can create a little bit of space and freedom for you sometimes. It can maybe shock you. It definitely needs some debriefing most of the time. But in general, I think that probably another large takeaway from all of this is how important play is and how important stepping outside of our perspective is in terms of what it can add to our lives and add to our joy and add to the joy of those that we choose to interact with. So that's me for today. And if any of you happen to be headed to Burning Man, I will be at Camp Beaverton on Tuesday, I think at 3 p.m. or 6 p.m. Sorry for the difference, but they haven't confirmed it yet. Talking, where you can ask me lots of questions. So if you happen to be there, do join me. Otherwise, I will see you at my next Q&A, or I'll be in New York just after. Thank you.